So what I'm going to cover now is probably the very, very first step that you do when you have an idea. Is it a good idea? And what this is the methodology, the way to think about it to determine whether it's a good idea or not. So even at the end of this, you just decide that it's not a good idea. You will know the process and be able to assess it for later. You'll be able to use it even if you go to work for a big company, because all companies are looking for people who know how to assess the commercial potential of a new product or service. So the best way to find out whether it's a good idea is ask your customer. And the reason why we're really going to stress that is because the number one reason why startups fail is there really isn't a market need. You're building something that actually nobody really cares enough about or wants, where the current solutions are good enough. So if people do it at all, they do it the wrong way. And so what they do is they go around and they say, here's what my idea is, what do you think? Or they have a demo, they have something, an app they're going to show you too. And the reason is that immediately focuses on your solution. What we're going to talk about, though, is actually called customer discovery, where the whole purpose is to focus on the problem, not your solution. That comes later. So customer discovery now is baked into everything that's entrepreneurship. You hear it, we all refer it, we all call it the same thing. And it is basically a big problem that a lot of people have because you need a big enough market where the current solution isn't working very well. And that you're trying to figure out, am I solving the right problem? Later comes in, now that you know that you're solving the right problem, am I solving it the right way? But you have to start with phase one and you have to do it right. So what exactly is customer discovery? So what is the pain or problem you're solving? Be real clear about that. You probably do figure that out. Who is having it? And this is very specific, individuals or people. How bad is the pain? So if you go into a doctor's office, the emergency room, and you say, I've got a pain in my stomach, they always ask you on a scale of 1 to 10, how bad is that pain? And what you're looking for is pains of 8, 9s, and 10s. This is an intense problem where they're probably looking for a solution. Then you want to know, how are they currently dealing or solving it right now? That's the competition. And the competition, frankly, could be they're not doing anything. But that's okay if that's what they're how they're addressing it. So same question there. If you were to ask people about, well, how are you solving the problem now on a scale of 1 to 10? How is your current solution working? What you're looking for is the 1, 2s, and 3s. So big pain or problem where the current solutions are really bad. So those are the ones that really are the most successful. And this is what customer discovery is intended to actually tease out and find out what the situation is. So this is a very busy slide, but it is basically the scientific method. You're going to come up with what we call your thesis, what the core of what your business idea is. You're going to then come up with some hypotheses or assumptions or beliefs, what must be true for this business to be successful, and ways to test it. And then based upon the information, then you go back and you do more testing. So this is modeled after the NSF I-Core methodology, which I've become a great fan of. And it is to literally help PhDs and researchers get their product to market. So it starts with a business thesis. And sorry for the jargon, but all it is a simple statement of what it is your business is. Who is the customer? And specifically, who is the buyer? You know, who's going to actually pay you money? And this is a person with a title or a description to it. It's not a hospital. You know, hospitals don't write checks, right? What is your product or solution? Put it in as crisp a form as you can. And then why will they buy it? And this is your assumption of what their problem is and what they value, what they're looking for. And you'd be surprised how hard it is to do this in a crisp, short way. It's easy to write a lot, but it's really hard sometimes to get this really specific. So that's the very first stage. So it's crystal in your mind about what at least your starting belief is, what your business is about. So then who's your customer? So I'm just going to introduce, there's a whole lot of people who are involved, particularly if it's a business to business type of thing, who are involved in, have a, you know, a stake in the outcome of what product or service is bought or used. And so we call them stakeholders. And so you have obviously the user, and you have others that could be influential in making the decision on what products or services are going to be used, in, particularly in a company. If it's a business to consumer, often the user is the buyer. You're downloading the app, you're buying the software yourself. So during this customer discovery process, it is best to focus on the user, they're the one's going to be using the product, and then the decision maker, and this is your buyer. And we're going to point out a little bit of the role of a saboteur, because sometimes there are individuals within an organization or an infrastructure that don't really want you to solve the problem because it threatens them and their job or their self-esteem. So not to overly worry about it, but sometimes you stumble into these. So usually we go through this, and those who are going to be doing the customer discovery Kickstarter will actually create this. Who is the customer? Again, it's a person. Will this specific customer, will they buy? Will they lease? Will they license? Will they, exactly what is the verb? And this is, again, you don't know for sure, but this is what your starting assumption is. And then specifically, very specifically, what are you proposing to offer? And lastly is, why would they buy it? And I'm going to emphasize this thing they call a value proposition. And give you an idea, a very simple example about how sometimes, what you think is why they want to buy it is not it. So let's just say you're a copier salesperson and you show up at Olympus and you asked about my copier, and I can make 20 copies in a minute, and it costs me 5 cents a copy. And you say, hey, I can cut your cost from 5 cents to 2.5 cents. Wouldn't you like to buy my copier? I said, so here's the difference in there. So you think I value cost. And I said, no, I actually don't care about the cost. I want a copier that will do 80 copies in a minute. I value speed. So just because this is what you can do is not necessarily what the customer is looking. And this is what you will discover doing customer discovery. Okay, just for those, all the you techies in here, people are not buying your technology. They're buying a solution to your problem, to their problem. So you go into a car dealership and you are looking to buy a car. Do you really, really care about how the details of how that engine works and how it's so efficient? Now, I know a couple engineers in here will say, oh yeah, I love that stuff. But the reality is what most people value is miles per gallon, repair rate, other types of, how good will this car do? How fast will it go? So value propositions, and I have just a few slides here about how to think about it differently than just what you can do. What do they really care about? What jobs are they trying to get done? And there's a lot of great value propositions, and I'm not going to read this to you. These slides are going to be available to you afterwards in the archives, the workshop archives. But just to kind of tease out different ways that you can think about the value of the customer may value what it is you're planning to do. So I went through some of we call them our business concept templates. Many of you filled them out who are applying to the CDK program. And I just picked a few if I was to create their business thesis in there. So specifically, administrators in the customer segment is secondary schools will lease the platform that coordinates teams. And the reason this person thinks that what the administrator will value is preventing quitting or burnout of the teachers. And I'm gonna flip to the last one here, only because this was one that spent a whole lot of time talking about the technology. And so I couldn't really figure out what the value they were creating, but I did my best. So they have now, it's managers or owners, these are the buyers of small to medium restaurants, will license their solution that will, big value, they quickly install a voice assistant to take in calls for reservations. And, but the why the restaurant valued it was not real clear, because all I did was talk about how it would work. So is it to obtain more reservations? Is it to free up staff time? Is it, so thinking through, you get excited about what your product or service is, but think in terms of what the customer is looking for. So when you create your business thesis, it is a person. Don't, all university, it is a person in the university or a person in the company. If you can tell me about the segment. So in one case, it's with school, it's for secondary schools. So they think that's the target audience that will be most interested in this. And so we're not going to do this now. We would do this if this was a workshop. So now that you have your thesis, now we come up with hypotheses. This is pretty much what must be true for this business to be successful. And this is what you're going to test during the customer discovery process when you actually go out and you interview and you talk to potential customers. So, so a good hypothesis, clear, concise, specific, testable, measurable. It's just like the scientific method. And so here's some examples of how to start the sentence to help you come up with good hypotheses. And I'm not going to read these to you, but you will see that it varies all the way from what the stakeholder particularly wants. It will also have things that you believe that you will beat out the competitors, the current solutions, that you will find out if their willingness or their ability to pay. All these are good as hypotheses that you need to test, in addition to, are you solving the right problem? So you identify the customer segment, and okay, I forget your name, but you have the education product, right?
Yeah.
So is it for, and I thought I heard you say K through 12?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not for university level, it is for the general. Do you think it's going to be more for 1 through 5, middle school or upper school?
So basically I've divided it into segments. So one segment is kindergarten and elementary, and then the next would be high school and middle school, and then one segment is homeschool and the other is senior secondary level. Okay, so what she just told me is she actually does have segments. And so you might have a belief that this is going to be more valuable for the kindergarten through up to 5th grade. Maybe, maybe not, but it could also be more valuable for the upper school. So I would just tell you, when you start this out, pick a segment just to start. So you get a little focus to this, you get some practice in there, and see, after you go through some of these, going through the interviews, you figure, well, they don't seem very interested. Let me tell them, try another segment. Segmentation is your friend because it will really help direct not only your questions, but ultimately your marketing and sales. So are there multiple industries that could use your product? So prioritize just everybody, whether you're part of the CVK or not, pick one segment in order to get started and to learn the process. So these are some more examples using the other one there. Secondary schools. So other differentiators, does it matter whether it's public versus private? Does it matter on the size of the school? And other potential segments are, in this case, could be elementary, community colleges, or training programs. So you will find somewhere along the way, those who do customer discovery the right way, and I've been doing this since 2008,
that teams that do this 100% end up doing something different at the end. Sometimes it's a little sort of a shift. In other cases, it's pretty significant. And so what you want to do is make these, figure out if you're headed on the right track early on before you spend much time and money. So let me give you a real quick example of this. We had a team walk into my office called Smart Bell, and 2 MBAs and 1 engineer that they're all workout buffs. And every day they go to the gym and they're religious about capturing, what machines they were on, what the reps were they did, what the settings were on the equipment. One had a little book, the other had something on the app, I forget what the third one. And they're tired of that. They wanted to make it really efficient. So they came up with the idea of selling to others, individuals who also workout buffs, to put a sensor on the machine. The machine would sense, how many reps you did, what the strength was, and then it would send it to an app on your phone. So at the end of your workout, you have a complete record of everything that was done. And very excited about this. And he said, oh, we sent out a survey, by the way, and everybody came back and said it was a great idea. I said, okay, we're going to do this a little bit differently. What I want you to do is we're going to come up with questions, not a survey question, but I'm not talking about your solution at all, about how they do their workout and how many people actually record this stuff. And you're going to start at the CMU gym. I want you to go to the Pitt gym. There's a gold gym at Squirrel Hill. And I think it was over a longer weekend and one of them was going home. I said, go to the gym in your community and see what you find. And just stop random people, strangers, and ask just 5 to 7 questions. They came back a little sheepish. And they said, we found most people say, nah, I don't have to record it. I pretty much know what I do. I have maybe 2 things that I switch out in there too, but the general interest in actually tracking was very low. And they said, we're actually kind of surprised because our survey said everybody really liked it. I said, well, who did you send it to? I mean, how many of you answer random surveys from total strangers? Not many. So it was a statistically invalid population. So you're laughing there too. And so you send it out to your friend, most of whom are like workout buffs. Oh, yeah, okay. So they tainted their research in there. But what was interesting, and here's where the big aha was, said, most people just said, we don't really care about the tracking. The thing that everybody was griping about was getting on the machines. They try to maintain their heart rate and they're doing the pace. And then there's a backlog of, apparently it was leg machines were the big things that seemed to come up. And that was what universally at all their interviews seemed to pop up. And so I said, aha, we ended up changing them, saying, let us go from the user buyer, the individual, let's go talk to the gym owners or managers and find out how many complaints they get from people about getting onto the machines. Well, that was a big changer. This is where we went from that to, oh my God. One manager said, oh my God, I get complaints every week. They come in, they say, I need to get additional machine for this and there too. And they said, well, they're expensive. Plus, I don't have a lot of space. I don't know what to get rid of in order to put this in. And he said, do you know what's worse? To take your car in after 5,000 to 7,000 miles and get it tuned up. I have no idea how much these machines are being used and what time I should call in the service person to come do the tune-up. And you think it's bad then, wait till one of them breaks down. And that makes it even worse. And I have no data. I have no idea when to pull people in or how it's used, and I would pay for it. Cha-ching, cha-ching. So this was the hair on fire, the 8, 9, or 10, where the current solution was, there was no solution. There was, other than sort of looking around or waiting for a machine to break down. So they ended up pivoting. And what they ended up doing is, as the engineer said, oh my God, this is so easy. I can create the Yelp for these equipment. And you should put a off-the-shelf sensor, nothing special, on the machines that will know when it's running. And we can send that over the current Wi-Fi. And the owner can see, when these machines are used and how much it is, and so have a better idea when to call on the service people. Plus, they found out from the gym clients that this was great because then they could rearrange their work, their visitation schedule a little bit around when the machines were more available. So huge pivot. Before they wrote one line of code, spent any kind of money, and it was for a market that really had a big problem that wanted a solution. So keep that in mind. All right. So what you're doing customer discovery, you want to focus primarily on the user and the decision maker. And you need to figure out who those are. And I'm going to skip through this a little bit more. So this is the brainstorming. Write down what your hypotheses or assumptions are. Just plain old what must be true for this business to be successful. You can do this in a group. The people will help you. And then figure out, well, what questions can I ask to test this? And you're looking to prioritize 5 to 7 questions. It is easy to come up with lots and lots of questions to answer, but people will not give you that time. We just found out that 5 to 7 really good quality questions that you could follow up and iterate on are more effective than coming up with a huge shopping list at this stage. You want to pick those that are measurable. My favorite question, which I tend to overuse, is on a scale of 1 to 10. And those some examples like how many times in the past 3 months, what steps do you need? And then you want some qualitative. You can say, well, tell me how that solution worked for you. What do you like about it? What don't you like? So this is literally a worksheet. Customer interview guide. What segment are you interviewing? And yours going to be grades 1 through 5 in whatever. The job title is going to be the school administrator. I'm making that up. We don't know yet. What has to be true for this business to be successful? Well, what questions can I ask to make it work? So again, sample hypotheses. This is a way to kind of jumpstart it on how to think about structuring your hypotheses. They need to be a positive statement, not a question. Just literally, this must be true. And so more real sample questions to test those hypotheses. So some of it is qualitative, some of it is quantitative. And some of it is, it's not only about the solution, but also how are decisions made on which things are bought. So who has to approve purchases? And great question, who else did I talk to? Particularly important if you're going into a company, because it seldom is a problem or a potential solution going to affect only one individual or one department. So qualifier on that, and the 5 to 7 questions, asking about job title and position. I don't consider that as one of the the major questions, but you do want to know how long they've been there. If they've been there 2 weeks, 2 years, 20 years, you have a better sense of what their experience has been. And it's also kind of a good way to get to know the person a little bit and learn a little bit more about them and what they do. If you interview different stakeholders, you're going to need a different set of questions. And I have a case study, which I'm going to run through that will give you an idea of what I mean by that. Avoid the have you ever. Try to put it in some sort of a time bound. If you ask me, have you ever skied? And I said, oh yeah, 40 years ago. So my experience is not relevant. And be careful of the would you ever. These are aspirational and people they mean well sometimes, but this is where I've seen teams go wrong. Because would you, and it's easy to say yes, and then they don't. So what you want to do is find examples of past behavior that will let you understand whether they would buy your app. Have they ever used an app that's similar? So this is to get started in there is just choose a segment, write the hypotheses to test, get your questions, and then do some interviews. So this is the template that you use. You interview, covered that. So where do you find these people? So I was helping out a life science, it was in a program, and this is just for life sciences, but there is similar what I'm going to show you for every industry or every segment. So you start with people you know directly. You can ask around your colleagues, does anybody know anybody who teaches anything? We have what's called domain experts. We have over 150 people and close to 50 some categories in there that specialize in e-commerce, life sciences, manufacturing. So these people have already been qualified, pre-qualified, and they've already signed up to help you. So these are easy ones to start with. And they also know lots of people. They're not necessarily your buyer, but they know the industry and they can give you some names of people you can talk to. But then look around locally. You will be working with entrepreneurs and residents who knows probably our local system in here, and they can give you some ideas of organizations where you may be able to find some people that, in this case, it was life science and health. LinkedIn, look for alums because they will help CMU grads, and LinkedIn for the industry you're after. National organizations, there's a trade association for everything. They have events, they have speakers, they feature people, and so they've already put their name out there. And again, sometimes authors or speakers at events as well as authors. So there is a thing, it's called industry maps. And if you Google it, whatever your segment is, you will find dozens of them. And you can't read this, you're not meant to, but you'll see every type of company you never even heard of and already segmented for you and what their role is. So IoT and healthcare, medical device, transformation map, AI, using this too. So these are all places to find if you're looking for potential customers there. Drones, fashion, chemicals, batteries, payment systems. What's this? Smart traffic. I mean, honestly, and I deleted about a dozen more. You can find it, and it's a great way to sort of get who's a player in this. So how to do the actual interviews. So I will just tell you, you can't Google this. You have to get out of the building, you have to talk to real people. And face-to-face is best, but nowadays Zoom is a great proxy. There's also something I'll talk about shadowing in a minute. Online surveys, Claudine C. Blank, who is the father of this lean startup, this whole movement, just says they're crap. Because it's hard to write a true survey that isn't what I call leading the witness or injecting your bias. The only time it would ever be, let's say you're doing something for people who have cars, and you could ask the survey, do you have a car? Yes, okay, then you're a potential client, but don't ask much more beyond that, because it's really hard to structure those questions without leading the witness. Technique, 15 minutes, 5 to 7 questions. Nobody's going to give you an hour. But most people will give you 15 minutes. Now, if you hit on a really big problem, they'll give you more. I participated in the National Science Foundation ICOR team as a industry or business mentor, and we were interviewing, cold calling law enforcement. And I'm not just talking sheriffs, I'm talking FBI, Department of Homeland Security. And they didn't know me from Adam, but you say, hi, I'm helping a team with, we're doing some research at Carnegie Mellon University. Use the university name. It's a great door opener. It's a lot of prestige. I said, I just have 15 minutes. 5 to 7 questions. It won't take any more than 15 minutes. And I promise at the end, you can hang up. Can you help me out? Grudgingly, uber busy people said, okay. And then I was getting a pain of probably a 10. And I couldn't get some of them off the phone. I even have one that says, I really got to go. Can we resume this discussion tomorrow? They were just dying to tell me what the problems and the challenges are, what they have tried before. But sometimes after 10 minutes, you realize you're not the target audience. And so it's okay if it's a little short. Move on. So, big rule. You're not allowed to talk about your idea. This is not the time at all to talk about your solution. This is 100% entirely focused on the problem that the customer is having. Okay, getting started. So I just kind of gave you, use the student card, it works. And you start with a few people you know, friends or friendly as I call it. Those two you can practice and you get kind of your rhythm about asking the questions or asking them the right way. Then you have to go after people you don't know. And if you're doing a business to business type, you don't need to talk to the CEO, the CFO, the CTO. You want to also look for usually the middle level people are probably the best to do these interview with. You want to ask who else should I talk to? And this is where you can get warm leads or ideas. And then occasionally you might want to ask, what else should I have asked? Because you're pretty focused and, are you asking the right questions? And sometimes they will give you a lead. One of the best resources you can use, or actually two, is there's a pamphlet. It's called Talking to Humans by a guy named Gift Constant. I read it over lunch. It tells you how to write those emails, how to get past gatekeepers, particularly on cold calls. And people have told me the before and after, and they get mad at themselves because Kit, you told me to go read this, I didn't. And then, 6 weeks later, they did read it and they said, and it just literally changed how people responded to me. During the time when you're actually doing this, sign up for the premium version of LinkedIn. You get a free for 1 month, then you quit, so no cost. And that allows you to go into deeper connections. These questions that you're coming up with, not a checklist, sort of a prompt about different things that you can ask. And what you really want to do is follow up and go into more depth in there too. And so one of the best things you're going to learn is when you hear something really interesting, just say, tell me more. This is where those interesting things happen and you get much greater insight on why you're talking to a person as opposed to Googling this. So no matter what, always ask, how are you solving it now, or try to solve it in the recent past. And this works, I think it's magic in there. On a scale of 1 to 10, how is your current solution working for you? It's quantifiable. It has, just gives you a number. And then no matter what number they give it, ask, why did you give that number? And write down everything they say in the order they're saying it and in their words. Here's why. They're giving you the feature list. So let's just say, hypothetically, they gave it a 3. Okay, not very high. And why did you give it a 3? Well, it doesn't do this, and that's one of the most important things that I need. It does this, but it doesn't do it very well. It only does it this way, and I wanted to do it that way as well. They're giving you, in priority order, what matters the most to them. Any of you who are writing any kind of a software or you have any kind of a solution that requires coding in there, you probably have all these ideas of these features that you can use the customers will love it. Well, I'm going to tell you a story. It's a true one. Steve Hoffman, the founder of LinkedIn, before customer discovery, he was on a panel. This is like 7 years after LinkedIn was launched and was being used all over the world. I mean, people had signed up for it. And he said in the very beginning, when we were designing LinkedIn, we said there were 5 features that we thought were essential for the minimal viable product before we launched. We had written 4, and we were running out of money. So we had 2 choices. He said I could go raise more money, which I hate to do because every time I raise money, I give away part of my company. But also it takes time to raise money, and they were afraid of competitors. Or they could launch with 4. But the team was adamant. It's just like building 4/5 of a bridge. This isn't going to be the experience. It won't be a true test of whether this is what people want. And big discussion, big back and forth. So Reed said he went home that night, he thought about it and he thought about it. And he came in the next morning and said, we're going to launch with 4 features. Well, the team almost mutinied. They thought this was the worst decision ever. And they said, too bad, I'm the CEO. I cut the majority shares. We're launching with 4. So here he is on this panel 7 years later. And he said, you know what? We never launched the 5th feature. They had thought that they knew what the customers wanted, and turned out actually when they got launched, they got real feedback. That was not an essential thing. It came down very low. And so listening to what they say they like or what they don't like about it, they're giving it in the priority order of what really matters to them. And you can spend a little more time sort of probing on this too, but why is this important? How do you use it? They're also talking about the problem, their solution in their words. So really good salespeople listen to you and ask you, how do you talk about your courses? How do you talk about, the last game that you played in there? Because they introduce that into either their marketing or their sales pitch, because you're going to be talking about the problem a certain way or the solution. You want to know how they talk about it. What words do they use? And also, they will be telling you when they're giving these ratings, they're helping you evaluate what the competition is. They'll tell you what they really like or don't like. And so you go, oh, okay, so I know I can be better. Well, let's just say they gave it an 8. That's pretty high. So why did you give it an 8? They'll tell you what they really like about the product. And then I would always ask and say, well, what would it take for you to give it a 10? And they may give you what your competitive differential, that one thing that will be, or 2 things that will be really different that will make them want to buy you. So again, listen for the unexpected. This is the Smart Bell example I gave you, where they were talking about everybody complaining about getting on the machines. And if you hear something that's interesting, just ask, tell me a little bit more. And I'm thinking, you know what, maybe I ought to revise my question and stick this one in here and begin to test it. Or occasionally you can go back to somebody who was very chatty and helpful and said, yeah, I have one more question. I forgot, I wanted to ask it. Could you tell me? And then go from there. So this is where the pivots happen. And again, you want to pivot before you've wasted time and money. And when I hear companies that, they've been in business for a year and then they pivoted, I thought, they didn't do their customer discovery very well. Exceptions that could be made if a regulation changes or a new product comes on, but usually it's because they think they know what the customer wants. So I'm going to go pretty quickly through a B2B case study. This is true. This is one of my students. He ended up being hospitalized. And while he was in his room at night, he was experiencing extreme pain. And he tried to call the nurse using that call button, that's tethered to the wall. And nobody was showing up. So he got out of bed and he was trying to get to the door to call the nurse, and he fell. And this was the start of an idea for him about coming up with a product or service that hospitals could use that would increase or improve the response rate. So here's his business thesis. He believed his buyers were going to be hospital administrators. They will lease his system, which was a smartwatch that a patient could call a nurse from anywhere. So you could be in the bed, you could be in the bathroom, you could be online on the floor like he was. And the nurses have a similar watch that they could say, oh, patient 32B needs help. And the value that he thought they really were looking for, to reduce the number of injuries patients incur when not responded to quickly. So that was his thesis. So hypotheses. Slow response leads to serious and expensive injuries. So the question was, what is slow? And the reason why the nurses were not responding, it's not because they didn't care. It's because usually at night, fewer staff, and they sit at a nurse's station, and when you put the bell, a light goes on, or a light goes over the room, then the nurse gets up and goes into the room to help that patient. nobody's at the nurse's station. Or it could be, it's a busy night, there are a couple of nurses, but everybody's in a room helping somebody else. They don't know that other patients need help. So it's not because they were lazy or they were indifferent. That he believed that the administrators would pay for a new product to reduce injuries, because he knew that patients do hurt themselves when they get out of bed. He hurt himself, happily not seriously, but it could have been. And also his assumption or his hypothesis that hospital administrators would pay for the data on the number of requests and response time, a metric they could track. So that's what he started out with. And so primary segment he was going to go after were hospitals, but he thought, maybe nursing homes could use this. So he looked at stakeholders. The users were nurses and patients. The decision maker, he actually wasn't sure. Who was the economic buyer? Was it insurance companies? Was it the board? Who in the hospital would actually decide to buy something like this? And his saboteur, he thought it could be the IT manager, because IT managers, particularly in hospitals, don't like to introduce new systems because it just complicates things, and a lot of things have to work together. He did use industry data to learn the size of the problem. This is called secondary market research. And we have a librarian that specializes in entrepreneurship. And if you want to know more about your industry, his name's Jimmy McKee. He's wonderful. Librarians are wonderful because all they want to do is help you. And so you can find a lot of this size of market and a lot more about the industry as a whole using secondary market research. It does not replace primary, which is actually talking to people. So he did something, it's called shadowing. He got permission to go into the hospital. He followed around the nurses. He observed the patients. He observed the staffing administration. It interviewed them at the same time, but he could see a lot that sometimes if you can get on the floor of the production manufacturing thing and actually see what's going on, there sometimes you don't even know to ask the questions. So he interviewed lots of different people. And so I'm only going to go on this one in depth, but you can see later the hypotheses and the questions he used to test it. So specifically the nurse administrator who did the scheduling for how many nurses were going to be on each shift. How do you learn that a patient needs help? Ask that question because that tells you what the current solution is. What do you like most about it? What do you like least? This is somewhat of a competitive assessment about the features that are necessary, what they value. How often in the past week was the response platform unmanned because the nurse was helping a patient, which is, he learned that from the first question about how they know. And this is measurable. So is there a frequency number? Do they even know? Can you give me an example of a recent issue because no one responded? That's qualitative. And the follow-up could be, what was the result? So this is just an idea of the kind of questions without anywhere talking about your solution that you can find out how bad the problem is and what the value is they're looking for. Who else should I talk to? Which is really good because in the hospital, they say, well, people are dealing with patient injuries. Here's some other people that care about this that you might want to talk to. So second hypotheses, again, and I'm not going to go over this too, but I'll tell you why you're going to ask this too, but they really good questions that test whether that hypothesis is true or not. And what he found out ultimately that it's the CFO who is the primary driver of making the decision to buy the system. And so here's what he learned is actually it's a huge problem. Injuries of $1.2 billion cost to the hospitals. They occur when patients are not responded to in 2.5 minutes. Because then they try to help themselves. Insurance companies are out of it. You hurt yourself while you're in the hospital has to pay for it, not insurance. And here was the key thing that, he had no idea. Medicare was beginning to reimburse based upon the number of stars that you gave the hospital, based upon patient satisfaction. So if you only had 3 stars, you only got paid this much. If you had 5 stars, you got more. And he had no idea. So this was a huge motivator. Hospitals were looking for ways to improve their ratings. And there was an excellent individual he didn't know existed, a patient satisfaction manager that he learned to ask for and interview. Nursing homes, which he also did interviewing, they have the need, but they don't have the financial incentive because Medicare, it doesn't make any difference in their payment. IT person, didn't care because they were just using the Wi-Fi, and the decision maker was the CFO. He also found out, longer story in there too, that he wanted to do a pilot, 10 beds for 1 month, and wondering, trying to get one hospital to sign up. So he went out and he asked if anybody willing to do a 10-bed 1-month pilot. All the hospitals signed up. It's what do I do? I can't do them all. I said, well, we'll charge. How much is it going to cost you for the equipment to do the test? We're not trying to make money, just to cover your cost. He said $5,000. I said, okay, start, see what happens. They all signed up. I said, well, we didn't charge enough. But anyway, he did get the pilots. And I also learned, this was my second hint, that people will pay. They really care, the big problem, or there's a great value to them. They will pay for pilots. And yeah, there you are. So that's proof, that's concept in there. So he revised his business thesis. Now he knows CFO, hospital administrators, it's a joint decision, will lease the missed calls platform to reduce the number and cost of injuries that patients occur when not responded to within 2.5 minutes, he had the time frame, and big value that he had no idea was there, increased patient satisfaction ratings. So I have anybody here doing a business to consumer? No, you're not, believe it or not. It's going to be, you're selling to the schools in there too. So this was a base, and I'm going to do this really, really fast because this is actually easier in a sense than doing a business to business in there. Student ones, if you've ever paid Capture the Flag, they were going to come up with an IM version of it. You could download it onto your phone. You would do it in Teams, and when you capture the flag, you actually got a coupon that would give you a discount at the Subway or at what's the next thing? Eatery places or at the art store or whatever. And so two-sided business, the consumers were actually targeting students, and the businesses where students could hang out that actually would bring in new business for them. And they did customer discovery the right way. They did over 100 interviews, a mix of male and female, CMU, Pitt, Chatham, and later they interviewed more at Carlo, Duquesne, and Point Park. I mean, this is University Row, 1 bus ride to reach any one of these. And here's some sample of the questions, and I'm not going to go through them too much. You can look at it too, but one of the things that they did is not only did they learn stuff, but they influenced their design, and they also, one of the few I've ever seen, actually came up with the marketing language that they would use to sell. And just by the way, female students do not pay for apps. Nowhere. They weren't planning on that being a source of revenue, but I just thought that was interesting. And here was where they went wrong. When was the last time you played Capture the Flag? Why not more often? Students had not played recently, and the reason was because of lack of time. So their conclusion was spread the game over a longer time period when you don't have to commit a big block. And this is, I'm going to talk a little bit more about this. Then ask, would you play Capture the Flag? This is the would you question. Either I missed it or they put it in. This is aspirational. Look at this. 80% of CMU said yep. And 10% maybe. Look at those numbers. And they did a lot that's right, where they missed the mark. When they rolled it out, less than 10% of anybody signed up. And because they this is what's called confirmation bias. They were not open to hearing that the lack of time means they didn't have time to play any games, not just play their game. And they didn't probe that further. But by the way, I will tell you, the merchants loved it. It was the most effective of any of their marketing campaigns compared to coupons they handed out themselves or marketing messages or advertisements anywhere. So anyway, so end result, they got into Alpha Lab, they launched, they did some revision to make it shorter, but it just never took off. Students just didn't, although they did like getting the coupons, but they just not enough adoption to make it a viable business. So I think they gave it the go away here too, but to really do customer discovery well and right, there's the magic number. Anybody remember what I said before? Shout it out. How many?
How many questions is that we have?
How many interviews do you need to do? What'd you say? 100? Okay. Anybody else want to take a guess? First time I saw this, I was part of the National Science Foundation, where I just curious about where they got that number. I have since become totally convinced that this is, it's something somewhere along the way that if you stop too short, you don't really know your customer segment that well. So, but for the customer discovery Kickstart, we just set you 20 interviews, so you know how to do it. But honestly, that's just the start. And if you're serious about your business and continue to be, you need to do more. Keep notes, forget, you'll assess, and here's all the benefits. You pivot, yeah.
So, if we're developing a product, based on an existing competitor, where we know there's market fit already, and we know that there's users, and we know that there's vendors for that product, do we still need to do this extensive customer discovery process, or does it make sense to just kind of apply the solution that you noticed in that product and try to go to market as soon as possible?
So we probably have to talk a little bit more about this in there too, but what I find is sometimes is you think you know what the fit is or what they're looking for when you're trying to come up with the competitive differentiation. How much does that matter? I mean, they literally, you're asking people to fire their current solution and hire you.
Well, just think about like a business to consumers and B2B, right? B2B product, you're there's licensing, there's, certain contracts that are in play, there's sticky things that you kind of have to unstick in order to get your product in there. But like for B2B or B2C, for example, Lyft and Uber are the same thing. You know what I mean? Do you really need to go interview all of those?
Yeah, so there's another variation on that. It's called landing pages sometimes, and there's other ways to sort of test it in there too. But too long for here, but your approach could be different.
Oh.
But you still need to do some.
Okay, so I just like email you.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay. Right. And more benefits in there. So my final word on this is fall in love with the problem, not your solution. Make sure you're solving the right problem before you start. And so you kicked off with the first question, but does anybody have any more? So they did flip through some of this a little fast. Yeah.
When you ask the question, from 1 to, tell me from 1 to 10 how big, you think is the problem and whatnot, what happens if we don't want to tell them what the solution is, right? That's what I'm getting at with. But what happens if they don't see it as a problem because they haven't heard about any solution how to fix it? Like if they just, hey, this is the way we've always done it, we put this amount of resources, we've always done it this way, so I don't think that it's a problem, but you think that you do have a solution.
Okay, it's really hard to tell people they have a problem if they don't think they have a problem. And more importantly, if they don't see it as a problem, they're less likely to ever buy a solution to something they don't see as a problem. That to me is a lot of learning in there and saying, no, people, they don't think it's a big problem. And maybe you think it is, but they're the ones doing it. So the answer is probably not a good idea. But in the process, what is the problem? Okay, tell me, what keeps you up at night or whatever. And this is where your pivot might happen. Okay? They'll tell you something that's related, that you haven't thought about. Yeah, in the back.
When you're building and you get like, you're following up, like you asked that question about how the problem is on 1K, and then they kind of start giving you that priority list of like problems or features that they encounter with it. How wary are you of them giving you solution oriented feedback? Like, do you think that that's actually reliable, or are you more focused on what they say problems are?
Well, I'm gonna sound like a lawyer, it depends. But maybe that's one response. So that's why you wanna do, multiple ones to see how other people respond to it. And you'll find that there's a trend that occurs. And you can probe a little bit more if well, you said this, but can you tell me more? Or you were a little vague about this, or whatever. So this is where it's not a check off the box. You just sometimes have to go a little deeper. Not sure if I answered your question, but if I can handle it more afterwards. Yes.
What if you're solving some sort of big problem and there's like many solutions out there? Many solutions. There are some solutions out there. How do you know your solution is better? Yes, thanks.
Okay, so the question is, how do you know if there are multiple solutions out there? Ask your customer. What are they using? How well did they like the solution, the current solution? What's missing in that solution? So this is and by the way, it can be, in some cases I've seen a lot of applications, what we call a very crowded space. There are lots of solutions out there, and so there's, how to improve employee morale and, help them have a better life experience. There are lots and lots of programs out there to help employees in the workspace, and so you have to really do some programs. And what are you using now? So that's, but you'll get better at asking those questions and you figure that out. Yeah.
So in that are you talking about our solutions?
Yeah.
No.
So here's what will happen after you do the customer discovery interviews there. You'll notice there are going to be certain people that are really helpful, and they have this problem, they're really excited about it. So after you have that, you're going to phase 2. Once you're really sure you're solving the right problem, now you want to find out if you're solving it the right way. So you will go back to these people you have starred or noted in your interviews in particular and just say, you told me you were having the following problems. I think I have a solution that might be solve those problems for you. Maybe play a little bit back about what you said. Would you mind taking a look and just telling me what you think? And I will just say, for those who've done customer discovery the right way, and they do this too, inevitably, one of those people go, can I try it? A reference customer, a pilot, gold, and often they'll pay for it. So, so you go back afterwards. Now, occasionally in interviews, and this had this happen too, say, why are you asking me all these questions? Can you tell me what you're going after? And you can say, well, if they're really persistent and then are reluctant to answer, say, I can tell you afterwards. But right now, I don't want to influence or bias your responses. So I'm just put it on the answer to the questions, and then I know what I'm. I really hesitate saying so because you can't help yourself. You want to talk like this. And so, but it's far better unless they really ask you that. If you say, can I get that? I'm working on a solution and an idea. I'm not ready yet. I can get back to you in a couple of weeks to tell you what I've learned, what I think is, and get your opinion. So you can defer as well. So I think time is kind of up, but if we can ask the CDK, Melanie's going to go really quickly about what you need to do when to participate in the program. It only be one department.
4 slides.
4 slides. Yeah. So I don't know where it is.
It's Okay, just really quickly, just want to go over some of the information for the Customer Discovery Kickstart and just what the expectations for the program are, give you a little bit more information on that. So, we started this Kickstart, we've been doing it for about 1.5 years. We modeled this program on the NSF I-Corps. Kit mentioned that program a lot during her talk. The reason we did that was because they had a change in the requirements for the I-Corps program, where before we could take student teams or alumni or staff. Now it's really, they're just targeting the faculty research teams for the I-Corps program. So we wanted to give this experience to everyone that we serve. So it's a 4-week program. There are 4 required cohort meetings. They take place on Zoom. There's no in-person requirement for this program. For this next cohort, those are the dates, October 25th through November 15th. They take place on Wednesdays at 4 p.m. So those are required Zoom cohort meetings, and there really isn't any flexibility with the times, because we have to, that seems to be the time that works best for everyone. So an hour long, except for the final meeting, which is an 1.5 hours, because you'll do final presentations. You also will meet one-on-one with an entrepreneur in residence. That's what EIR stands for. We have 3 or 4 that work specifically with this program. And so you'll meet with them outside of the cohort meetings as well for one-on-one coaching. The goal, as Kit said, is to do 20 new customer discovery interviews during the 4 weeks of the program. The content is, we use some on-demand videos. Some of those are from our I-Corps hub, and we will have homework due every week. So you'll have a deliverable due every week for the cohort meeting. And there is a time commitment. It's around 5 to 7 hours per week is what our past participants have told us they spend on this course. So just want to make everybody aware what your time schedule looks like for October, November. We offer 2 of these every term. So there's 6 a year. So if it's not going to work out that you'll have 5 to 7 hours to commit to this time, we'll be doing another one probably in end of January. We'll do another one in the spring after that. So there's plenty of opportunities to participate if it doesn't work out right now. So we just want to go over the expectations. So this program is to teach the fundamentals of customer discovery. You're not gonna have everything figured out in 4 weeks. It won't even be possible. So we just want to teach you how to do this and how to continue to do it. We provide feedback in the cohort meetings. It's very fast paced. We only have an hour. We do break out into smaller groups so that you get a little bit more individualized feedback, but there's still, it's a short time frame. So you'll get honest, direct feedback. It'll be very quick to help you to move, make progress quicker with your startup. So we're there to help you make the progress towards product market fit. That's the goal. And as I said before, 20 interviews, tip of the iceberg, 4 weeks. It's just the start. So what we don't do in this program is we don't work on anything like company formation, building a team. We really feel that it's just critical to find that product market fit first. So we're not going to give you any advice on forming a company. We're not going to have you doing any marketing or sales of your product for this. So if you're interested in want to apply to the program, because you're here today, you came to this session, you will get an email with a homework assignment and a link to a Google Drive folder, and everybody will have an individual link for their startup. So you will upload the completed homework by Wednesday, October 4th. You will have the you'll submit it first on the 29th, sorry. So you'll submit your homework on the 29th. So that's this Friday. you will get the feedback by October 4th, and you'll get an opportunity to resubmit. If we give you some suggestions on some things you could improve, you can do that by the 6th, and then by the next week, you will hear back from us. So that's the requirement to be considered for this Kickstart program. So that's it. That's all I have. So does anybody have any questions on the procedure? Yes,
Yeah, need to have our team ready for this.
you have to have, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Do we need to have our team
No.
ready?
No, you can do it as an individual. Yes, yes.
In your email, everybody that's here today or?
No, it's actually, so it will be you, whoever signed up on our registration. So this one was a little confusing because we wrapped this in with this Connect session. So you had to kind of register twice. So you needed to register on our registration form. So whoever did that signed up on our form, and whoever came to this today, once we see the attendance, then those people will get the email with the homework and the link. Okay,
Because some of you didn't even know.
yes.
about the
So if you
certification
didn't
today, so.
see me, or here's my email. If you did not know about that form, send me an email and I'll let them know to send it to you. Okay.
I got a mail from Project Olympus stating something similar to this. Is this part of that track, Olympus track?
It is part of Project Olympus. Yes.
So that's the same link that we had to register for.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, I actually saw you.
Yes. Yeah. So we saw that come through. Okay. Okay. Anything else? Okay. Yes.
If you cannot attend at 4 p.m., it's not a good idea.
Yeah, so that's free. The 4 p.m. time frame is the required time frame. Yes, but I will say this: we require at least one team member. So if you have a co-founder, if you have other people you're working with on this and they can come, then that can work. You know, so it doesn't have to be everyone on the team attending. We've had that situation. So, but we do need one person from every team.